So the first episode was themed on number one, which vibes to sun, whereas the second episode is on number two, which vibes to the moon. So when you start off a business or a venture, it's very important to decide your purpose, which is something that we tried to answer through episode number one. Once you've got the decision to do what you have to do, once you've decided that you need to act in a particular direction, you need people to support you in doing what you intend to do. Moon has the best lessons for people management, which we would try to communicate through this particular episode. So interestingly, Moon is the mind. Moon is also the mother. So wherever Moon is placed in the natal chart, becomes the Rasi or the sign, the moon sign of that particular individual. So moon sign essentially governs the character, the nature of that particular individual. Moon is, as I said, is also the mind. And in Vedic astrology, notes of the moon have been given a lot of importance. They're called Rahu and Ketu. And Rahu and Ketu essentially define the kind of problems or issues or the lessons that an individual has to learn in this particular life. So in Rahu and Ketu are defined, so basically Rahu and Ketu can be placed only in 12 ways in a natal chart. And broadly, according to Vedic astrology, there are 12 kind of lessons that an individual needs to learn. So this is something that I'm going to talk a little later. Let me just start off with a few other aspects of people management, and then I'm going to come to more philosophical and maybe esoteric concepts of people management. So, why people are different from other means of doing business is because there is an element of sensitivity which is represented by the moon, which people have, which is not there in some of the other means of doing business. Which means that people have to be handled very, very differently compared to other means of doing business. And invariably, how these people are behaving would ultimately decide where your organization is reaching. So people management and people become extremely important in running and organizing businesses. This comes to a very interesting question which people often ask me is, why do people stay in an organization? So there's a very simple book that I picked up called 1 Minute Manager. So that throws very interesting light on why people stay in organization. It says that people stay in organization because of 4 factors. First is autonomy, second is connectedness, third is perspective, and fourth is tone. So autonomy essentially means that if you're giving somebody responsibility, they should also have certain authority to do things what they want to do. Connectedness, a person can only start performing once he knows that he belongs to that place. So for an individual, because he's sensitive, it's very important for him to be able to belong to a particular place before he starts performing. Perspective, any individual, is very important that they should know what is in it for them. In case he's willing to sacrifice for the organization in the short run, he should know that there's light at the end of the tunnel. There is something that is going to come his way, which is perspective. And finally, tone. An individual is not away from his family or not away from his desire to grow and learn. So if this organization provides this individual ample opportunity to build himself, to grow as an executive, as an individual, as a person, and also provides him enough time to take care of his health and be with his family, then it works out very, very well. So, I have also realized, that HR has a very, very important role in any organization to play. But many a times they don't get the due which HR actually truly deserves. That's because many a times lack of strategic approach. Strategic approach is not adopted by many organizations. So very important aspect of the strategic approach that I'm talking about for HR is the fact that people, which is part of HR, people have to be aligned with operations and strategy. So a very neat theory or very, very elegant theory is something that I came across by Natler, Galbraith and McKinsey, which says that organization has to perform a strategic intent. So strategic intent could have a financial perspective, it could have a customer perspective, it could have processes perspective. So whatever the centricity or perspective or it could be a combination of several perspectives. So this particular strategic intent actually gets divided amongst various people. So once you've decided what you want to do, you would need people to do it. So that's where competencies come in. So whatever an organization has to do gets broken into various departments and people. So the strategic intent gets broken amongst people, and people are competencies that you would want, because different roles would require different competencies, and not not same individual can perform whatever you need to do to achieve what you intend to do. So you need to have gradations, and you need to have the right kind of competencies to perform the role that you're planning to perform. Once you've got competencies in place, you want consequences. Consequences is essentially a decision to drive certain behavior. How do you drive a particular behavior in your competencies? That gets defined through consequences. This is, the flow for this would be, performance management and things like that, where people exactly know what their perspective is, and there is a clear consequences which are drawn for them. So once you've got the right competencies, they know exactly what they need to do. You need governance. Governance is a structure that you create to ensure that competencies are there, they are doing what they need to do, and there is a proper line of command which is ensuring that strategic intent is being achieved. So now that the organization has got the competencies, they have also driven behavior of these competencies to a particular direction aligned to their strategic intent by defining the right consequences. They have also got a governance structure to manage the structure of competencies and consequences. This is not enough. Now they have to move for change management, because an organization is always dynamic in nature. The environment is dynamic in nature, and things keep on evolving and changing. And the organization has to be aligned to that change, because many a time strategy is also not cast in iron. It is also constantly evolving. So you need to have a structure of change management and also organization development, which ties in with the tone aspect, which I touched in the earlier section. So this is a very interesting model which I came across. I thought I'll share with you guys. So many times when I meet companies and HR professionals, they ask me how should they be treating people. I'll talk about a bit of philosophy to make you understand this concept. See, in Vedic philosophy, it is believed that you travel as a soul across bodies. So as a soul, you are subjected to birth and rebirth. Why are you traveling from one body to the other is essentially defined in terms of the lessons that you need to learn. These lessons are often played out in terms of patterns in your life. And the best ways to learn these lessons are through relationships. And that's how God has planned everything. So when you interact with people, there are certain karmic residues that are carried forward. It could take you births to learn this lesson. So you need to understand that as a soul, when you're interacting with other people, as an individual, when you're interacting with other individuals, there is a certain karmic residue that you're creating, and that needs to be balanced out. People tend to travel in soul groups. So when you're doing a people management strategy, when you're in a situation where you're stuck with difficult bosses or difficult, subordinates or peers, or there is a situation, it's absolutely tailor-made for you to learn that lesson. How it plays out is that, if you notice, if you're having trouble at work, if you're having trouble with people around you, you notice around the same time, you will be having trouble at your home as well. You could also maybe suffer through certain health ailments. So multiple problems tend to come to your life at the same time. And this lesson that you need to learn, but the moment you learn this lesson, the moment you are able to deal with that situation, there is grace and you move on to the next level. So your lessons are often played out through these lessons which are presented to you in terms of relationships. So what is the way you need to deal with these relationships? The best way to deal with people is to deal with love. Love and tolerance. Moment you exercise this principle of love and tolerance when you're in your interpersonal relationships, when you're dealing with people, you'll realize that there is a lot of grace that happens to you. There's a lot of clearing the way that happens for you. Many of your hurdles are surmounted much more easily, and you're moving on and progressing much more faster than you ever did. So this is very, very important and a subtle lesson that we need to learn as a soul. In fact, the importance of relationship is also something that is scientifically proven. There is a very interesting study by Dunbar. Robin Dunbar, he's an anthropologist, and he extrapolates the sizes of brains of primates, and he also compares it with people. And he realizes, and he extrapolates and says that the size of the brain of human is actually correlated to the number of relationship a human being can handle. And the number that he arrives at is 150. And interestingly enough, this is a number that rings through across various other cultures as well, who had realized and they had built their communities around this number of 150. This is something that, through trial and error, a company in America also realized called Gore Associates. What they did is, moment their companies crossed 150, they created another unit. So they created infrastructure to handle for a unit only 150 people. So they create enough bays or enough parking places to accommodate only 150 people. They realized that moment this number increased from 150, there were disturbances. There were a lot of trust tax. There was a lack of trust. There were a lot of problems, interpersonal issues, which sort of held them back from progressing. So relationships are very important, and we need to treat people with love, because this is part of the lesson. This is part of what we have come to this earth to learn. So infuse love in your dealing with people, and you will always come out victorious. So you can actually treat people with love and fairly, yet the hierarchy can be maintained if a very important aspect is understood, which is that while people have to be treated fairly, not all people are equal. This is something that is important for an organization or different levels to understand. People should be treated with love and fairly, but they are not equal in hierarchy. So it's very important, because organization has to run with certain discipline. You would have heard the whole saying that there can only be one captain in a ship. So it's something similar to that. This hierarchy is very, very important. So consequences and competencies have to be managed by governance, as I said. So that's very important. Yet you can bring in this aspect of sensitivity and love and treat people fairly for you to understand and balance your karmic residues, which would otherwise keep on playing out in your life over and over again until you learn them. Because most of the lessons that you need to learn are played out in terms of relationships. To talk about this particular aspect, there's a very interesting book that I was reading, Art of War, which is again a very famous book by Sun Tzu. There are certain excerpts from the book that I would want you to pay attention to. This is a very interesting line of thinking. Obviously, the context there was the army, and they're talking about the ranks in the army. But I think it sure has some takeaway for regular organizations as well. So I'll just pick up my piece of paper and read out what I wanted to tell you. The book says, if you punish them before they have won loyalty, they are useless. So they're talking about the ranks, obviously. If you do not punish them soon enough, they are useless. I'll read it again. If you punish them before they have won loyalty, they are useless. If you do not punish them soon enough, they are useless. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive. And unless submissive, they will be practically useless. If when the soldier have become attached to you, punishments are not in force, they will still be useless. Now it tries to balance out the things, and it says, if a general shows confidence in his men, but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. So these are, some thoughts that I wanted to leave on this section with you. So the essence is, people have to be treated fairly with love, because most of the lessons that you need to learn are being rolled out to you in terms of relationships. And by dealing with these relationships with love and fairness, you're ensuring that you're balancing out your karmic residues. And the moment you learn your lessons, there is grace that you'll experience in your life. I was talking about a situation where, you see a lot of problems. played out at the same time. When you're having trouble at work, you also have trouble at home, or your child is not doing well, or there are multiple issues that keep on happening, your health deteriorates. So very, 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 very important aspect that you need to pay attention to and understand. Once you balance out these relationships, which can only be balanced out with love, grace happens in your life and you move on to the next level. Many of my clients, raise questions around this area. Is it, the concept of round pegs for square holes, saying that, is there a fitment for every individual? So saying that a guy who's good at HR should only be good at HR, somebody who's good at business development should only be handling business development. Or can a competent guy with basic skills and a level of intelligence can move across into different roles and probably excel in all the roles? I have a slightly different take on this issue. I believe that, people don't just perform a role, they get fulfilled in a role. So getting fulfilled in a role is a very, very important thing that you need to understand. You're not just performing a role, you're playing out your destiny. You're playing out your purpose in this life in doing what you're doing. And invariably, people are better at certain things and they're likely to excel better at certain things, depends upon their proclivity, their drives, than in other things. So you're doing, as an HR manager, you're perhaps doing a disservice if you're not putting the right person at the right place, because you're disallowing that person to live out his destiny and bring out the best that he has to offer. So this concept of putting the right people at the right job can be better explained through this very interesting book that I read called Selling the Wheel. So this book says that an organization is shaped by 4 kinds of individuals. And these 4 individuals are described as a closer, a builder, a connector, and a captain of the crew. So at the beginning of any organization or beginning of any industry, when the technology is new, you need a closure kind of a guy. So closer is this flashy guy who he enjoys selling new concepts, new technology, but he gets really worked up in case he needs to do operations or do something else. Because that's what he is, that's what his proclivity or that's what his basic drive is, to sell new concepts. So he enjoys it as long as there's a new concept to be sold, but moves on the moment the concept becomes slightly tried and there are more players in the industry, it becomes slightly more difficult to sell the product because there are more players, people have understood this concept, it is not that much exciting for him. But while he's selling the product, he makes certain promises which probably could be slightly more, let's say slightly more exaggerated than the reality. But that's his true nature. He's a business development guy. He loves to sell. He excels in B2B sales. So the moment this guy has sold and gone off, because now this concept is not that exciting for him, he needs to move on. There is a requirement for an organization of a person called a builder. Builder is a guy who acts as a conduit between the organization who's bought this product and the operations. So there could be some gaps in how the product was sold by the closer, but builder comes and bridges this gap. He has a great understanding of both the operations and a decent enough understanding of client relationships as well. So that's the evolution of the organization and the requirement of that individual. But after a while, when the organization has developed, the industry has matured, there is a lot of competition in the market. A lot of people are offering very, very similar products. Then because sales, there is very little product differentiation between what A company has to offer from B company, is the personality of the salesperson that comes to the fore. And it's the relationships that become very, very important. That's where a connector becomes the need of the hour. So connector is not a flashy guy like the closer, but he also excels in B2B sales. But his style is very different. He's a guy who's always there. He's always there for the client. He continues maintaining the relationship irrespective of the fact that he's not getting any business. But what happens is, since he is at the doorstep of the client on a regular basis, he is in motion. The law of dynamic providence comes into effect. And he also often gets business over other people because he's withstood this relationship without expecting anything, and he's continued to show up at the door. As you know, Woody Allen would say it, 80% of success is actually just showing up. So that is the need of the hour at that moment, given the evolution of the industry. Then finally, when the industry has really matured and there's a large workforce to be managed, it's a factory setup, you know, there's large distribution channels to be managed, there's production to be taken care of. There is so many other aspects which require large teams for things to happen. And that's where you need captain of the crew. This guy is great at people management. He might not be a great salesperson. He's not fantastic at operations either, but he's great at motivating and managing people. And he does that admirably. So not every individual, you know, would have been able to do all the roles, all the different roles, because their proclivity or their nature is different. But they excelled in their roles. And that was the need of the hour, or that's important, because an organization is a bunch of activity that it does to perform eventually to achieve its objective. So with these thoughts, I end this episode, which is themed around the moon and the sensitivity aspect of people management, saying that people have to be handled sensitively, they have to be handled with love, while people have to be treated fairly, they're not equal. It's important to provide strategic role for HR, and one needs to think strategically, because at the end of the day, organizations are a bunch of people. If your people are very well aligned to your strategy and operations, there are better chances for you to move on to your next level of growth and unlock your true potential.